Last week in Michigan politics, confusion and concern after the Trump administration reportedly aimed to freeze federal grants and loans around the country. From nonprofit housing assistance to local government, what it could mean here in West Michigan if those dollars are put on pause. Plus, for the second election cycle in a row, a U.S. Senator from Michigan says they will not be running for re-election. Hear from the senator who's stepping aside and who may step up to replace him. And as some in Grand Rapids call for the city to become a sanctuary city amid a federal immigration crackdown, what does that declaration actually mean? We break down what they're asking for and what a legal expert says cities can and cannot do. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Rundown. And this week, we've continued to follow news out of Washington after President Donald Trump's administration had reportedly planned a pause to many federal grant and loan fundings. A federal judge temporarily blocked the action from taking effect this week, but what happens next is still unclear. While the memo that directed the freeze has since been rescinded, according to the White House press secretary, the freeze, she said Wednesday, was not. But in the wake of that initial freeze being discovered, local organizations that rely on federal funding were very worried. We spoke with people across the area to find out what their concerns were.
We are scared too.
13 on Your Side caught up with Jim Davis after a meeting of Grand Rapids Public Safety Committee on Tuesday. But David also serves as the Vice President of Business Development for Family Promise of West Michigan, working with children experiencing homelessness.
We work with them to prevent that homelessness episode, to divert them from a shelter scenario. We take care of them with emergency services in those family shelters. We help with eviction prevention, permanent housing, and we even do home ownership.
But now he's concerned their efforts are in danger, following reports of a memo sent by President Donald Trump's Office of Management and Budget, which, according to ABC News, ordered federal agencies to, as much as they could under law, pause federal assistance deemed potentially out of line with recent executive orders.
A significant part of our budget comes to us from the federal government. And if that's all on pause and our organization doesn't get that, the services that we're used to giving on a daily basis, 24 hours a day, to all of the kids who don't know where they're going to sleep that night, that gets put on pause.
Here in Grand Rapids, the 2024 city budget included millions of dollars in federal grants. Things like public safety departments, community development that deal with housing services, and for citizens in need are all areas the city manager told us have federal funding.
We don't immediately see any imminent risk to city services, but long term, it may have an impact, and that is very, very concerning.
One legal expert also concerned over the wording of that order to pause, citing a 1974 congressional act requiring the president to provide lawmakers with a warning before deferring budget authority.
Congress came up with a process saying you can't do this. If you want to rescind, it means you don't want to spend the money at all. You have to first give us notice. If you want to hold the money for a period of time, you have to first give us notice.
The White House on Tuesday clarifying assistance going directly to individuals, including Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, food stamps, and welfare benefits, was not subject to the pause. But here in Grand Rapids, leaders getting to work to find out exactly what to expect and how to move forward.
We are coming together on the behalf of all of our community. And while we're not sure what tomorrow looks like, we know that our mission is unwavering.
Josh Alburtus, 13 on Your Side. And here in Michigan, Representative Bill Huizenga said spending under the Biden administration last year is the reason for the funding freeze order. He also said small business funding, farmers, Pell Grants, Head Start, rental assistance, and similar programs would not be affected. Huizenga says this gives the federal government the opportunity to review programs if the freeze were put in place, and he said that hasn't been done since 2002.
there's no attempt to quote unquote weed the garden, to be able to go in and figure out what are the programs that are working, what are those programs that aren't working. And so I know that we are going to be working in conjunction with the State Department, Marco Rubio, but also the appropriators within the House and the Senate to go in and look at these programs.
And the Michigan Democratic Party chair issuing a statement criticizing the freeze as it was earlier this week. It read in part, quote, "This is yet another clear sign that Trump simply does not care about us. He will only ever work to help himself and his billionaire buddies. It's despicable, and Michigan Dems will do everything we can to protect our communities from his destruction." And if the courts do allow the funding freeze, it will not impact Social Security and Medicare, but many believe it could impact healthcare research, education, and other local programs and groups. 13 on your side's Jeremiah Brown looks at one nonprofit in Grand Rapids and how the decision could impact them.
I can understand that a lot of people want to rein in government spending, but to put an immediate pause on all the federal grants and loans that are out there could have really disastrous impacts for lots and lots of residents around West Michigan and around the country.
Friends of Grand Rapids Parks is a group that works alongside the city's Parks and Recreation to improve and maintain the city's parks.
We receive federal funding for a lot of work in planting trees and conservation and invasive species in parks, and so there's a potential to really disrupt that.
Executive Director Stacey Baer says they received a $5 million grant from the U.S. Forest Service. He says losing access to those funds can have long-term impacts for operations and their staff.
And if that federal funding stays paused for too long or goes away, we're definitely going to have to lay people off. And that also has ripple effects in the economy, right? So, I mean, this is a termed 5-year grant, and it has a huge impact.
But Baer is clear they are not the only ones impacted and says the work they perform benefits everyone.
And we're just one organization that's impacted, right? There are hundreds of organizations around West Michigan, as well as municipal programs, housing, research for pediatric diseases, cancer. All those things are stopped right now.
With the trees for the spring planting season already purchased, he says their team will continue their work, but hopes a solution can be found so impacted groups can continue serving their communities.
Anybody who's applied for any of these grants is committed to doing well for all people, not just one group or another, and that's the spirit we need to be moving forward.
Another West Michigan organization that could be impacted by a potential funding freeze is AgeWell Services of West Michigan. Its Meals on Wheels provide hot meals directly to senior citizens in Muskegon, Oceana, and Ottawa counties. The organization receives, we are told, 50% of its funding from the federal government. Losing that funding would mean cutting deliveries from 1,400 a day in half. The executive director says the possible freeze could not come at a worse time.
We can't keep up with inflation. We can't keep up with, there's not enough money to be able to provide the services based on mounting wait lists for every single senior serving organization right now. So it even comes at a more critical time in America's history when we need help the most. We should be increasing funding for the Older Americans Act, and we should definitely not be freezing it.
She says if the freeze does happen, AgeWell will continue to serve the community to the best of their abilities. And turning now to Your Voice, Your Vote, U.S. Senator Gary Peters announced this week he will not seek a third term when his current term ends in 2026. Peters from Michigan was elected to the Senate in 2014 after serving 3 terms in the House of Representatives. He was the chair of the Homeland Security Committee until this year and also chaired the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. In a recorded message, Peters said he is proud of the work he achieved in a, quote, hyper-partisan environment and is looking forward to a new generation of public servants.
When I was first elected to Congress in 2008, I always knew there would come a time to pass the torch to the next generation of public servants and allow them the opportunity to bring fresh energy and ideas to our nation's capital. Our founding fathers envisioned members of Congress as citizens, serving their country for a few terms and then returning to private life. I agree.
Interest to replace Peters has seemingly already begun. Former Congressman Mike Rogers, who lost to Democrat Alyssa Slotkin in the race for Michigan's other U.S. Senate seat back in November, posted to X this week after Peters' announcement. While Rogers didn't explicitly mention the next Senate race, he wrote that he was, quote, strongly considering joining the fight once again. And there's already a lot of talk about who might run to replace Senator Peters. We also spoke this week with Democratic Congresswoman Hillary Scholten from West Michigan and asked if she had considered throwing her name in the ring.
My focus, especially this week with everything we have going on, is first and foremost on representing West Michigan, the people of Michigan's 3rd Congressional District, as best I can. I'm so proud of everything that we have built here, so proud that the people have sent me to serve for another term, and excited to be doing that work at such a critical time for our country.
Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer has said she does not plan to run for the seat. We also asked Congressman Huizenga about his potential plans. He told us he is not ruling anything in or out at this point. And the Michigan Republican Party is filing a campaign finance complaint against Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. The GOP says it was a flagrant misuse of public resources when Benson, a Democrat, used a state building for a press conference at the launch of her campaign for governor. While it is still to be determined whether this case actually violated the law, according to Michigan law, it is a misdemeanor to use public resources for political campaigns. 2 cases brought by Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel saw movement this week. First, the AG's office delivered oral arguments against Enbridge in a case seeking to shut down the controversial Line 5, a natural gas line operating partially under the Straits of Mackinac since 1953. The court ordered a temporary shutdown in 2020, and later Governor Whitmer ordered the line shut down in 2021. But Enbridge is still operating the line as it challenges these orders in court. The court said it will issue a written opinion on the matter. Second, a judge denied a challenge to a Michigan law banning conversion therapy, a controversial therapy designed to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. The lawsuit alleged that the law violates the plaintiff's due process, free speech, and free exercise rights, claims that Nessel rejects. Further litigation against the law is still possible. Turning now to Ottawa County, where the county has a new interim county administrator. The board voted unanimously to approve a contract with Gary Rozema, who was appointed earlier this month. Gary Rozema is the former Ottawa County Sheriff. In the contract, Rozema will be paid $14,000 a month and get 10 days of paid vacation. Rozema is the 3rd person to take the position as interim administrator since John Gibbs, the permanent administrator, was fired last February. The board then went into closed session to discuss a lawsuit Gibbs filed against the county. And after nearly a year of litigation, the Board of Commissioners approved a settlement to end legal proceedings involving Gibbs. 13 on your side's Lauren Baker reports.
The latest move in a nearly year-long case involving former Ottawa County Administrator John Gibbs brings tension among county board commissioners.
Everybody knows about John Gibbs. He's not off the hook even if you accept this settlement.
That settlement John Teeples is speaking about is the one presented to the board to end John Gibbs' case against the county. It includes $190,000 rescinding his termination, the acceptance of his resignation, and the release of claims he made against the county. Vice Chair Josh Berger was fully on board.
Mistakes were made when hiring Gibbs. The individuals who made those mistakes, there are 4 of them in this room. The county paid a price. The employees paid a price. Mistakes were made when firing Gibbs, and the county continues to pay a price. I'm interested in moving this into the rearview mirror and settling.
But others,
I think it's a bad deal and we shouldn't do it,
disagreed. One of the most outspoken was Commissioner Joe Moss, who was specifically named in the case against the county. He argues the board shouldn't accept the settlement.
The issue, the principle here, is less about the dollar amount and more about the fact that he wants both to be paid and to have his termination rescinded.
Commissioner Sylvia Rodia also disagreeing with the settlement.
And so to have this come back now and have him, a year later, want us to withdraw his termination when it was absolutely called for and he wants to now submit a resignation, which he had full opportunity and original intent to do a year ago. You know, there needs to be some personal accountability, and we can't just patch things and make everything happy and rosy when people misbehave.
But in the end,
Mr. Kyers.
Yes.
Mr. Berry.
Yes.
the board ultimately approved the motion, a move some believe will stop any more discussion of Gibbs in their meeting room. For 13 on Your Side, I'm Lauren Baker.
And in Kent County this week, many community members in the city of Grand Rapids urged the city to declare itself a sanctuary city. So we dug into what that status actually means. Now, the phrase is murky since it's not actually recognized by the federal government in law, one expert says. But what such a declaration declares a city will or won't do is a different story.
Please make Grand Rapids a sanctuary city.
People pouring into City Hall Tuesday night. Many there to call on Grand Rapids to declare itself a sanctuary city amid an immigration crackdown from the federal government.
Y para nuestra comunidad, santuario significa un lugar donde no tengo miedo.
And for the community, sanctuary word means a place without fear.
But what would that kind of declaration mean legally? One expert telling us the phrase sanctuary city on its own has no legal meaning, but there is a typical understanding of it.
A sanctuary city usually declares that they will not cooperate with INS or the Border Patrol in taking people into custody for violations of immigration law.
City Police Chief Eric Winstrom has made clear, while his department will not hinder enforcement, they will not be involved.
If ICE is conducting an operation and they call the Grand Rapids Police Department and say, hey, we want to remove some people from the city, will you help us? The answer is going to be no.
But referencing a 2019 city policy that allows officers to assist federal immigration authorities in the event of, quote, an emergency posing immediate danger to the public safety or to the federal agents, some residents feel the assurance they seek still isn't there.
It's kind of vague, but those of us in the activist community know that that means they can determine when things are supposedly causing public safety, right?
But can cities legally do anything when it comes to potentially resisting federal immigration enforcement? This expert said officials walk a tightrope.
Police in, for example, Grand Rapids cannot interfere with what the Border Patrol is doing. However, it has no legal obligation to assist.
Grand Rapids Mayor David LaGrange saying with the limited tools the city government has on the issue, it shouldn't overpromise its citizens or give a false sense of security. The city's policy does bar GRPD officers from asking about a person's immigration status when they seek police services. So he said a sanctuary declaration could simply become a label in America's larger culture war. While the City Commission heard these public comments and spoke to the matter, the city has not yet made any such declaration that it is indeed a sanctuary city. LaGrange said they will continue to deliberate on how they can help people to feel safe. And leaders of a Grand Rapids nonprofit that aims to help women refugees say President Trump's order that suspended the country's refugee admissions program could hurt those who are working to build new lives here. 13 on Your Side's Kiara Patterson has a look at how refugees could be impacted.
If we are stating that these individuals are unwanted in our country, it infers that the people who have already arrived through those pathways are also unwanted.
Many immigrants and refugees are feeling anxious after President Donald Trump issued an executive action suspending United States refugee admissions program for the time being. It's a move co-founder of Treetops Collective, Tara Carnahan, says would significantly impact her organization.
It would be the end of refugee resettlement as we know it. And that is not only impacting individuals who are waiting to arrive, but also people who are already here, who arrived as refugees, are receiving support for the first 90 days that they're here.
Treetops Collective is a nonprofit aimed at investing in the leadership development of refugee women and teen girls. Program Operations Director Jenna Fiore says if a now postponed federal assistance pause were to affect Treetops Collective, the organization would rely on support from the community.
If federal money for refugee-serving nonprofits is cut or frozen, we're going to need to mobilize our community to maintain the programs that we offer and stay here serving everyone and anyone.
Carnahan says she has spoken with a few refugees in the community who voiced their fear of being deported as refugees, uncertain of what the future holds. Her organization offers resources and programs for women of different ages in need of support. She tells me refugees and immigrants are valuable members to the West Michigan community, and she's doing all she can to support them.
West Michigan is welcoming. People do want to honor their neighbors and find space to celebrate diversity, and that is a bipartisan thing.
And in Muskegon County, the city of Muskegon Heights is looking for a new interim city manager. The city council discussed the search at a special meeting earlier this week. During public comment, a resident asked the mayor when the resignation of Melvin Burns, the current interim manager, goes into effect. She replied February 28th. And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. We'll see you next week.